Welcome back to Northstar Politics. It's me, Yisrael J. Arthur. I work on Novo. I work on the Canada project. I work on several things that you may or may not have heard about. Today, we're going to speak about Ukraine. We're going to speak about whether Trump actually is the master of the art of the deal. We're going to speak about an end to trial by jury for many of our peers. We're going to speak about the budget 2025. We're going to speak about the left too, and we're going to speak about whether the Israeli government is still committed to the ceasefire that it signed with strikes on Hezbollah in Lebanon. All this and more on perhaps, I've heard, one of the greatest shows, if not the greatest show on this side of Tower Hamlets. Now, let's get into it.
You are tapped back in with Northstar Politics, pushing political imagination.
Come on.
Myself, Noah East 9. The Mile End Malcolm X. We didn't land on Bethnal Green. Bethnal Green landed on us.
Jeez.
Different gravy, never lazy. And I'm here with the Enfield Eric Williams.
Come on now.
Biblical Jesus himself.
Some may say.
Sean Ramiz, find them on every platform.
You know where to find me.
DreamWorks, Moses, live in the flesh, let the people them go. And we have the immense pleasure of being joined by a big name.
Biggest.
Allegedly.
Yisrael, Novo Org. How are you doing, my brother?
I'm well. How are you?
It is lovely to be here.
You know what, yeah? I think he's actually the Mancunian Malcolm X, though.
The Mancunian
That's
Malcolm
what I was
X.
saying, though. Look how he's dressed. Look how he comes across.
You know, I can say this with pride right now, yeah, and I'll say it in line with Keir Starmer. On this day and this day alone, Yisrael has a right to defend itself.
No relation.
I can't lie, terrible time for you to pop onto the political scene over the past few years.
No, not even. You see, my name comes from the fact that my father is a bishop, a preacher.
Okay.
So the name has a sort of spiritual resonance.
Nice.
Yeah.
How are you doing today?
So far, so good. I went to an Oiga restaurant. I've got super malt in my cup.
That's real culture, though.
When I went to shops today, I was anyone want anything super malt? I said, okay, uncle. But no, honestly, Yisrael, it is a pleasure to have you on Northstar Politics. People at home, if you don't know about Novo Org, you really should. Brilliant platform. This guy just walking through any street you can find, any alleyway, just spitting the truth.
And you know what it is? From behind the scenes, right? Trying to create this type of political content. Most of us, we be scripting, thinking about like what we need to say. Man like Yisrael, off the cuff, one take maestro.
Bro, very impressive.
Thank you. I try.
Tell the people at home a little bit about your platform and yourself.
So let's see. I'm a graduate of the London School of Economics.
Like Gary Zuckerman.
I did anthropology and law.
Come on.
I'm from Manchester, the greatest city.
Big up.
Probably in the world, yes.
I don't know about that one.
Now people at home might not know I'm half Mancunian, so I'm there with him.
Is it? So what, it's the best one in the world? Best seat in the world?
Didn't say that, but I'm there with him.
It's close. It's close. If it's not top one, then, you know.
If it's not top
It's
one. And your platform, Novo Org.
Yeah, no, so that really came out of the pandemic. It was a different time. It was a dark time. You know, people were dying. My grandmother passed away. Kobe Bryant died in a helicopter crash. It was a very crazy time. And it was that sense of going from, okay, these are the things that I think, this is what I believe, to what do you do to try and get that into the public consciousness or discourse, or how do you just take it from being in your head to also like perhaps positively affecting people and their lives?
And the effect you've had has been crazy. Literally hundreds of thousands of followers across platforms. People I know who maybe aren't even that politically animated know about your stuff.
Yeah, people sending us like just your reels and be like, oh, you should get this guy on. Get this guy on. But you know what, today, because we know Novo Org, but we definitely want to dive a bit deeper into Yisrael himself, right? Because you're not just this guy. You are the mastermind behind what is becoming, or is, one of the biggest kind of political platforms for young people.
Allegations. It's not allegations. You're not beating them charges.
And also, obviously, at Northstar, like Noah said earlier, we want to push political imagination. And you've been someone who's been doing that for quite a long time. And we actually forgot to ask Sibo this, but one question we want to ask any sort of guest host, contributor, etc., whenever they come on, is what is your North Star? What's your guiding principle? Why do you do all of this in the first place?
I think my guiding principle is empathy. And it's because, for me, fundamentally, I think one of the things that's missing in our world is that people don't see themselves in other people enough. They don't see themselves in a lot of people's issues and problems and whatnot. They have absorbed a lot of, I'd say, social education, actual education that suggests that their problems are unique or specific only to them, or that if not by luck or providence or whatever you believe, you could have been in a different situation. There's, only a degree of separation stopping you from being born in the Gaza Strip or being born in Yemen or being born in a council flat or an estate, and that if things just shifted slightly, that could have been you, it could have been me, and that we all owe each other some form of empathy, really.
There, but
Caring.
for the grace of God go I, sort of thing.
Exactly.
Definitely. No,
Exactly.
that's big.
Really big.
We've got a big show for the people today. Budget talk, Ukraine talk,
Indeed.
all sorts of talk. We've got a bit of house business to handle, though. First and foremost,
Don't know.
everyone, next week, episode 9 is going to mark 2 months since we started.
That's crazy, man.
And we are trying to hit that 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. That is the goal. That's our North Star for the first 2 months. So please tell a friend to tell a friend to tell their nan to subscribe.
And we're only like 50 subscribers away, guys. So please just hit that subscribe
Also,
button.
you got to like and comment. If you're watching it and you're enjoying it, make sure you comment. If you're on Spotify, go to YouTube and like. Just support. We're still grassroots. We still need that investment
Innit?
at this
Because
point.
if you come up to me in the street and you say, "Oh, I'm a big fan of Northstar politics," I'll be like, "Oh, so pull out your phone.
Get the
Show
phone
me
out
where you
right
liked it. Show me where you commented, because that's what really matters."
And
I
then
don't
you
want
snatch the phone? Or what was
Nah,
it?
look at this guy. Man.
There's too much London in it.
It's the Enfield Eric
Listen,
Williams.
listen, don't think about. In Manchester, we do that as well. But yeah,
The other thing is, big thing we were talking about last week is naming the people that watch us, the supporters. And there's been there was a meeting in the comments, there was a meeting in different places, and we had some great ideas. We had people talking about the constellation. We had people bringing out the Polaris stuff, which sounds like a nuclear organization. I've kind of conglomerated a few different things, and I feel like the people that watch us, people that support us, each and every one of you, you're stars. So as a group, the stars them. I think the stars them, innit?
he's dropping that on me right now. But we'll workshop it behind the scenes.
I can't lie. It's landed there. The stars them, shout at you at home. Let's get into it. So the big topic of the day, literally announced today, well, actually leaked by the OBR last night, is the budget. So Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, has set out a whole host of policies that the government are going to put in place. I'll give you the headlines. New tax rises worth about £26 billion on top of the roughly 40 billion tax hikes in her first budget. The UK tax burden is going to hit a record 38% of GDP by 2030 to 31. They've also downgraded growth expectations for 4 out of the next 5 years. The measures she's putting in place: freezing income tax and national insurance thresholds until 2031, a mansion tax on properties over £2 million, some other tax rises on dividends, landlords, and some gambling activities, changes to some electrical vehicle ownership, and then some spending and welfare changes. So an abolition of the 2-child benefit cap, a rollback on cuts to winter fuel payments, and then also there's going to be an increase in pensions above inflation immediately, and some extra spending on public services. Initial thoughts seem to be that it was kind of a bit of a nothing sandwich. Some people were quite pleasantly surprised. Some people were a lot more fearful of a car crash. But we'll get into analysis of the good, the bad, and the ugly of this, and then some thoughts around all of the drama, to sort of discussing the being in hop to the bond market stuff. Yisrael, initial impressions of the budget.
Sure. If we're going with good, bad, ugly, then on the good, I think most people would say 2-child benefit cap being gone is a great thing. Over 300,000 children probably to be lifted out of poverty. I don't think you can say that there's anything bad about that necessarily. Other good things, I think you have income tax thresholds being like frozen. I think for a good deal of people who don't fit into the higher tax brackets, that will probably be a good thing too. And the fact that there's nothing that should necessarily cause the same sort of political fallout that happened with the 40 billion last year, i.e. national insurance contributions from employers going up too. In terms of the bad, some people probably think about what's absent from this budget, i.e. there's no significant necessarily, say, reform to council tax, which if we're thinking about wealth taxes, council tax to me is one of those things born out of the poll tax, which is one of the more regressive aspects of the taxation system in the UK. So if you were to change that...
When you say regressive, what do you mean, just to clarify that?
Regressive in the sense that you could have a house in a particular neighbourhood in Manchester which has a significant amount of, say, poverty that is charged at a higher rate than a house that happens to be in some of the most expensive boroughs of the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea.
I think it's indexed to house prices in 1991.
Exactly, exactly. And things have changed very significantly since then, and it can penalise people whose incomes are not necessarily anywhere near those of people in London. So there's things that are not in the budget. There's things like, for example, no new funding for women and girls, no reverse to, say, foreign aid spending. We can get into all that stuff as well. In terms of the ugly, I'm not sure there's anything that's, like you said, it's a bit of a nothing burger. I don't think there's anything particularly in this budget that made me think, oh, wow, that's that's horrible. There's some stuff that might produce perhaps negative incentives for people's behavior. So, for example, a 1-2p increase, which didn't exist previously on electric cars, depending on how far you drive with them, might disincentivize people from switching to electric vehicles. And if you want to have a sort of transition, whether or not you can do that on the back of consumer goods is one thing, but it is a plus for an economy that's trying to decarbonize more broadly. But that's what I'd say.
The other two things I just wanted to add were the slight increases to the minimum wage, and then also a change in the cash ISAs. So the thresholds moved down from £20,000 to £12,000. Sean, initial thoughts?
Yeah, I think I will just basically reflect what Yisrael said. I think nothing burger, like you said, Noah, as well, is the way to basically describe it. I'm quite interested actually diving a bit deeper into, and I'm sure we will, the kind of reactions pre and post the budget. Particularly, we knew that there were going to be some sort of spending concessions for families, right? So they recently announced that there was going to be breakfast clubs, and then now obviously ending the 2-child cap means that, yeah, I mean, it's a very good thing, and we welcome seeing that a lot of families will be lifted out of poverty. I find it quite interesting to see how people on the other side are reacting, because there's a sense of quite a sort of hypocritical nature to them not welcoming, I think, a lot of this, because ultimately for these types of people, whether they're from Reform or the Conservative Party, there's been a lot of talk online about how this is just basically enabling those on benefits and like large families, and also a perverse sort of reasoning around why this is a bad thing. So you talk about empathy and radical empathy, right? And I think, and it's my personal opinion, that the family is such a core unit of British society. But the way like some of these reactions that I've seen talking about literally just helping families who are poor raise children is just tainted with some sort of neoliberal thinking that basically suggests that they are literally having more kids because they want more money.
I mean, that's even quite a classic British way of thinking about the poor, the villainization of the poor, as if like poorness was a mental or degenerative illness.
No, for sure.
Some things I want to talk about, broad picture, is I think the financial literacy or the economic literacy, because I love to separate finance and economics, that people have around government finances really hampers our ability to analyze it in the public sphere. So one, this idea of fiscal rules. You will hear, and you've heard about this black hole, budget deficit, all these sorts of things. Government debt is at 100% of GDP, or the government's running a deficit at 100% of GDP. And it's always spoken about as a horrible thing. The other side of the coin to government debt is someone owns that debt. That's private assets. So if the government's really concerned about the debt, it should be trying to tax those who actually have those assets to balance that payment book. But this is not how like public finances work. And you hear a lot of economic commentators who say this, and I would encourage people to go and look at people like Richard J. Murphy, Simon Wren-Lewis, Gary's Economics.
Grace Blakely as well,
who talk a lot about how the myth of the government budget being run like a household budget help pervade this nonsense about fiscal rules. Any fiscal rule you hear Rachel Reeves or Keir Starmer talk about is self-imposed. Similarly, this chasing of GDP by the OBR or by whatever financial institution is entirely a neoliberal machination. I saw a good interview with Zach Palensky the other day where it's put to him that budget deficit's running at 100% of GDP. And he said, well, Japan's running a budget deficit of 270% of GDP. They have much higher living standards than us. So in the intention to focus on GDP or chasing GDP, which I don't actually think this budget will help us do, is entirely self-imposed. And that's something people need to be really aware of when they're looking at this. The other thing that we speak about on Northstar all the time is we need to talk about real terms. Because here they're going to say, a 4% rise in minimum wage, this amount of rise in wages or whatever it might be, or a change in the ISO, or the freezing of the tax income bands. But what that means, the freezing of the tax income bands, is that proportionally year on year, as there's whatever minimal wage inflation we experience, you're going to be getting taxed at a real way higher than before, at a rate that's higher than before in real terms. Similarly, if you see like a 4% increase in the minimum wage, but inflation's been in the double digits over the past 5 years on aggregate, you've experienced a real recession in your income. I think those two things, and Novo, you bring these sort of things out at the time. I'm referring to you as Novo instead of Yisrael, but on Novo, you bring these things out a lot. I think those things are just really important for people to understand.
Yeah, no, I think one of the huge gaps is like sort of nominal things, i.e. describing something as the headline figure and then what people's lived experiences are. Because despite the increases, say, to the minimum wage and an increase for millions of workers, on the same time as you're saying with an increase in the rate of inflation over the past years on aggregate, you have people's living standards still expected to be lower at the end of this parliament than they were at the beginning. And that would just simply reflect another real terms living standards decline when you compare it to even the beginning of the 2010s to even after austerity and everything like this. So what we saw at the budget last year with the 40 billion tax rises was a increase that was a sort of preventing you from going all the way back into austerity. And yet in real terms, especially if you look at, depending on which ministry you're talking about real terms, say cuts to the Ministry of Justice. For the NHS, in many ways, you're looking at a decline in the performance despite cash terms being a huge uplift for people. And I thought it was interesting when you talk about the hypocritical nature of some on the Reform UK or the Conservative Party. You talk about the family and want to defend the family, and the family is the basic unit of society. You know, Thatcher's saying there's no such thing as society. There's individuals, there's families.
There's only a certain type of family they care about, though.
Which is also true, where we see that there's many different kinds, and I see it all the time, you know, in my travels and whatnot, beautiful families. It could be a grandparent and a grandchild. It could be just somebody who stepped in to provide care for somebody. It could be people in the foster system too. And when you look at all those different kinds of families, if you're talking about actually supporting that unit, then it requires a different level and kind of support to what we've seen. And whether it's investment, say, in like public transport, or it's the fact that rent rises are outstripping inflation and wage growth, these things those structural elements don't necessarily fit into the broader terms and language of the budget itself.
It feels like the budget is aimed at something that is nominal and immediate. So when you think about investment in infrastructure or investment in young children or parenting and these sorts of things, these are quite delayed benefits. Whereas, say for example, this one, reducing the boundary for a cash ISA from 20,000 to 12,000, and that would mean more of your ISA allowances pushed into stocks and shares. For me, to be quite cynical, that is clearly designed to push up the nominal stock market as much as possible in the short term. And we know that a lot of the stock market isn't actually engaged in sort of what we call productive activity. It's more money managing for yields to increase. And kind of to daisy chain both of your points there, what I want to talk about is flows of wealth. I think there's become an increasing literacy and understanding that wealth inequality drives a lot of the poor quality of life or immiseration within our society. So when we look at different bills and different policies being introduced by the government, when you think about how that orients flows of wealth, one thing I want to bring up, the triple lock. So people might not be aware, but the triple lock is an agreement for pensioners that the pension, I think brought in by David Cameron, that your pension will rise at either 2.5%, highest wage, or inflation.
Oh yeah, so the highest.
So it's increase in wages or inflation. So whichever one is highest. So either be 2.5%, the highest of the wages, or inflation. And what that means is that the average working person relative to a pensioner never has a relative wealth transfer. The best they can hope for is that it's matched. They have the same level of wealth being transferred to them as a pensioner. And what that means is when competing for resources, assets, access to public service or private services, a pensioner will be disproportionately advantaged all the time, and that is encodified. And we see this with like tenancy stuff. If there isn't legislation brought in to help tenants fight back against the flow of wealth coming out of their pocket every month to the landlord, then month on month they will become disempowered. Their relative purchasing power relative to the landlord is always going to be weaker and weaker. When I look at any budget, I think about, is it addressing these flows of wealth problem in our country? And for me, this is doing nothing at all. It's fiddling numbers.
Well, arguably not, especially when you talk about the restrictions to what your ISA allocation is going to be. Of course, what Rachel Reeves is looking for, whether it's from the Gulf, India, or the US, is the kind of investment that often is very targeted, small scale, involves, for example, jobs in particularly quick growing sectors that often, interestingly, are reliant on highly skilled, high-paid individuals, either from abroad or from the best institutions in the United Kingdom. And how much of that sort of trickles down, you know, I hate the phrase for historical reasons, but how much of that trickles down to the average person is quite different. It reminds me of the discrepancy between what Trump was claiming about the stock market in the middle of the pandemic in America, where you had tens of thousands of people dying, but he was pointing to, if you like, numbers go up, therefore numbers good. And what we're seeing in the UK is that, well, one, the FTSE 100 is not necessarily a well-performing index. And then if you want to add insult to injury, whilst we're talking about those wages increase, you have this situation where with no cap or with no house building that meets the scale of the problem, you have people's relative power relative to landlords and other owners going down. According to the Equality Trust, you have just 10% of households control over 43% of the wealth. We haven't even scratched the surface if just 50 of the richest families control over 500 billion.
And with Rachel Reeves, I've never been a big fan of her ever since she made the comment that the City of London is the jewel in the crown of the UK economy. I hate to break it to you, the City of London is purely extractive.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I just wanted to kind of tie both of those points a bit together as well, is that when you're understanding the political incentives that go into making the budget, you can't divorce it from actual politicking and the fact that, pensioners now are going to be sort of benefited from this. And that's because, well, most pensioners vote. They want to ensure their kind of votes for the next election, but then also this is a part of a political class that brush shoulders all the time. And the fact that even Rachel Reeves' own comments, like you just said, is just reflective of that. And so I think when we're actually understanding what goes into the decision making of this, of course, it's necessarily going to be short-termist because the political tenure is short-term.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say then, and looking at that short term and how it joins with both the sort of intergenerational divide and also the nature of this budget and who owns assets in our society, you have that age gap, people who are able to benefit from lower house prices, who are able to benefit from a lower ratio of their salary relative to a deposit or a mortgage. And then you'd also have to talk about the great wealth transfer, where you have people in a particular kind of generation who might have benefited from 1, 2, 3 houses, receiving a business, who are now about to deliver some of the biggest wealth transfers in history that in terms of a percentage relative to that person's initial income, savings or wealth is going to dramatically or exponentially increase the amount of wealth certain people and a very small number of people from particular backgrounds.
You mean in terms of inheritance?
In terms of inheritance, they're going to benefit from. And then to add one more layer to that, you also have a situation where some of the biggest funders and supporters of Labour's policy, for example, Sir Trevor Chin of Labour Together fame, work with CVC Capital Partners, who are very heavily invested in the kinds of asset classes that these people will also go on to benefit. And it feels like one large circle.
Yeah, that's a big thing we wanted to get onto. Is you hear a lot of narrative leading up to the budget and around the UK's financial policy, especially the Liz Truss years, about we need to appease the bond markets. And I'm going to try my best to give a little bit of an explainer here. It's been a long day, and I'm 4 years removed from university economics, but
professors are looking at this thinking, gosh, what was I about to say?
So for anyone that listen at home, all a bond is an IOU for the government. So you buy an IOU from the government and they pay you back a certain amount each year. The amount they pay you back will be called the yield or a return on it. And when people talk about being responsible to the bond markets, essentially, they are worried about the government having to increase their cost of borrowing. So if for some reason the bond markets think that the asset they hold, that bond, that financial instrument, is going to become devalued, then they're going to ask for a higher return on that. That's what's called the yield. For anyone at home that wants to get a bit more involved in it, then you can go look up yield curves and you understand that a yield is inverse to the price of a bond. So if bond prices go down, yields go up. So when Rachel Reeves talks about we need to appease the bond markets, we don't want to have a crash like Liz Truss did, what she's talking about here is that we need to employ policies that are suitable to these chief executives and financiers who own a large stock of government government debt. And the things that they have, these are not neutral interests. These are not people that are democratically accountable. Their interests are corporate. Their interests are that of a creditor, and they have a bias towards low inflation and minimal wage pressure. What this then means then is that our whole economy is set up around a principal agent problem, whereby the government is, by that what I mean is there is a misaligned incentive for the government to appease the government who is democratically elected to appease a whole institutional sector whose interests do not necessarily align with the wider democracy.
And this is the sort of point I wanted to make around, like, we live in a democracy, but yet instead, when a budget is coming up, we're worrying about the bond markets as opposed to what people are actually going to think about this. And why it really is so pervasive, because, look, I think the discourse as well in particular is shielded by the fact that they treat this like a science. Economics is not a science, it's a social science, right? And the economists that are platformed and that you hear in the run-up are from a certain political class. We shouted out a bunch of political economists earlier in the show to show that actually there's thinking and there's theories that tell us it doesn't have to be this way. And that's the point of having this concept of pushing political imagination, because it's not impossible to have a society which is not basically controlled by these financial feudal landlords, if you want to call them that, particularly like even if you look across the world. Like, I'm not a big fan of China, but do you think China allow a financial class to actually run the way the country works?
And just before I bring you in, Yisrael, one thing I want to point out to people is when you hear this narrative all the time about we can't increase the deficit, government debt is too high. Okay, we said before, government debt has to be owned by someone. That is an asset to someone else. And if you are the financial sector or the bond markets who own government debt, what you don't want is a devaluation in the asset class you own. So an increase in government debt, even if it's to invest in schools, invest in public infrastructure, invest in HS2, whatever it might be to improve the quality of life of the average person, you as the financial executive are saying, no, I don't want a devaluation in my asset class. Therefore, the government should not be increasing their government debt. This is the myth that underpins a lot of government thinking. These financial principles principles are self-imposed.
And also, again, before you come in, because I know you're going to spit some wisdom, this kind of school of thought of macroeconomic thinking has only really been existed, or has only been in the mainstream since the 1980s. This is not some like eternal law that governs the way the world works, right? It is literally malleable by us.
And even I think in the mainstream, this whole like budget or household budget idea about government spending is pretty much a coalition thing for it to be in the mainstream.
Not just a coalition thing. You'd also have to go back further to the 80s, to Reagan, to Thatcher, to Milton Friedman. And this idea of economics is also something that we could all access and understand, but in terms that happen to benefit perhaps a particular group of people. I was going to say, as you said, political imagination, but imagination more broadly. Imagination can either be a cage or it can be a canvas. You can either enclose your own thoughts, or you can escape the boundaries of what's been imposed on you and what you've received too. And then there's also a difference between rhetoric and reality. And what we have is a rhetoric that is so focused on this idea of debt as being a negative thing. But when we went to, say, university, and because of my mother's roles, a single mother working hard, you get the maximum amount of student finance. It's that same loan from millions of taxpayers that allows you to maybe invest in X or Y, to build your education, to be able to do the kinds of productive things that both, if you like, for those people who are in that asset class, might actually benefit them in the long term, and would also benefit ordinary people too. And you have that distinction between this short-term goalpost that people want, the difference between bread and jam today, or a 4 or 3 course meal down the line. And what we have is, by failing to tackle those structural inequalities, if we're talking about who owns bonds, it's like thinking about who owns stocks or who owns Bitcoin or who owns any particular kind of asset. It is that top 10% of a population that owns that government debt. And you'd also have to talk about, in terms of that broader arrangement of society, you'd also have to talk about banks too, who've benefited from years of quantitative easing, and that sort of easy access to capital has allowed a lot of people's assets to appreciate. And as you said, if you don't find ways, as politically difficult as it is, to tackle that or to tax that, then you either get a sort of easy answer that will blame it on the black and brown bodies coming across borders, asylum seekers, immigrants, etc. We can have an honest conversation about integration and all these other topics, but to blame an entire group of people as opposed to huge structural forces and changes that mean that BlackRock will find it far easier to buy more houses than the people on your own block.
Can't teach that.
Fairs, man. You know what it is? When I grow up, I want to be like Yisrael, man. Gosh.
Before we move on, final thoughts on the budget.
Is there any final thoughts after that? Just poetry.
No, I just think final thoughts to leave people at home with. I think, honestly, I would say think about flows instead of stocks of wealth. So how is this reorienting the flows of wealth in our society? Think about real terms, and also think about the principles that have driven this decision making.
Yeah. All I would add is cui bono. So who benefits from the decisions that are made? On one side, perhaps, if I started, my first job was at McDonald's, I might get a little extra, but how much of that is just going to be captured by people who don't want the value of their assets to depreciate, and who are going to push for benefit cuts down the line, or for a change to the tax rates that means that maybe national insurance does have to rise, or if income tax does rise, maybe it's not at the higher band, maybe it's for people who fit into the middle and the bottom too. And there's not enough, broadly for me also, there's not enough focus on how we can make working and middle class people's lives easier. And I think the lesson from our brothers, sisters and others in America is that by focusing on affordability and how people can actually have a life, i.e. the thing that we all dreamed of being able to do when we were children, you are going to continue to cede ground and lose ground to those who make a different kind of argument.
Yeah.
And I guess I'll just echo again, just look at the kind of economic thinkers that we spoke about: Richard Murphy, Grace Blakely, who else again?
Simon Wren-Lewis.
Oh yeah, Yanis Varoufakis.
Thomas Piketty.
That's an old name.
All right. Our next story is, I don't know if you see much about this, but Donald Trump, the art of the deal, he's tried to strike a deal. He has sold Ukraine down the river, down the Crimea. He has been absolutely bonkers. So there was a 28-point peace proposal set out by Donald Trump, drafted in part from a Russian non-paper sent to Washington. It's now being revised down to 19 points after major pushback from Ukraine and European allies. The core controversial elements from this peace plan, as it was so called, recognized Russian control of Crimea and large parts of the Donbass, so Donetsk and Luhansk. And at one stage, there was even floated concessions in Kherson and Zaporizhia. There's going to be military limits on Ukraine's army at around 600,000 personnel. There's going to have to be concessions made by Ukraine that they will denazify. There's going to be a requirement for Kiev to renounce NATO membership and adopt permanent neutrality in its constitution. And there was suggested sanction relief and vague security guarantees if a ceasefire and territory deal were reached. If there was a re-encroachment by Russia, then these sanctions would be re-put in place. The narrative around this and the commentary around this has basically been Putin couldn't have written this better himself. The idea, and that there'll be a total infringement on Ukrainian sovereignty. For those listening at home, sovereignty is the idea that a country or a person, but in this case, a country and a nation state, has the ability to enact their will within their borders as they see fit. If Ukraine is constrained by the threat of invasion to be neutral and not a part of NATO and not be able to conduct their politics as they want, and to have sort of de facto rulership of the Donbass and Crimea by Russia, then it's no longer a sovereign state. It's becoming what some people would term like Finlandized, in the sense that the Soviet Union was able to neutralize Finland post the fall of the wall. And, you know, we've seen this with the Israel-Gaza ceasefire deal by Donald Trump. This guy is just by any means necessary trying to make deals happen, irrespective of whether they're good or not. He's just gagging for a Nobel Peace Prize.
As long as it's good for him, right?
Yeah, and a deeper part of it is that there's so many propositions, sort of mafioso-like propositions within there, that these investment funds are being set up to rebuild Ukraine. 50% of profits going to the US, even though they're not putting a penny in.
Well, maybe Putin does have those photos of him blowing a certain former president then, I guess.
Zelensky got to get his files up. Zelensky got to get better files. But yeah. Thoughts?
I mean, well, thinking, you know, with the link there to the Epstein files, what you have is incredibly powerful people, often or seeming to think that the rules don't necessarily apply to them in the same way. What you have is with Ukraine is you have a sovereign country. You have people who should, like all people, have a right to self-determination, to decide, you know, how they want to live their lives, how they want to practice. There's conversations you can have about, for example, Gorbachev, whether or not he did or didn't hear an idea that NATO shouldn't enlarge beyond any borders. But that, at least for me, is never a pretext for invasion, for bombing civilians, for blowing up hospitals, for killing children or forcibly transferring them. The nature of the International Criminal Court warrants against Vladimir Putin and one of his deputies too. And if we're talking about this deal and we're talking about, again, who benefits from it, then you'd have to talk about, to a degree, Russian interference in the US election to some degree or another.
UK as well.
You'd have to talk in the UK as well. We can get onto that, actually. We'd have to talk about bots. We'd have to talk about, as you're saying, those who are going to be involved in the reconstruction. It reminds me of an earlier, a simpler time with Halliburton, or when it comes to Gaza, you could talk about BP, you could talk about several organizations, companies who are able to make their names on the crisis of, or tragedy rather, of human suffering. And when it comes to this plan, apparently they ran it through ChatGPT and some other large language models, and it seemed to be a document that was originally in Russian. That might be a bit crude, and there's other or alternative explanations that perhaps it was a back and forth over this particular document. But in terms of who benefits, we know that Trump tried to strong-arm Ukraine into getting rare minerals and rare earths, which are now becoming a sort of battleground for the future of electricity generation, power generation, military application and the like. And we know that we're moving into a sort of a world of blocks. There's a European bloc. There could be, hopefully one day, an African bloc or a non-aligned bloc. There's a US/North American sphere of influence too. And you have rising powers with India, China, Russia to varying degrees too. And in that world, it seems some have suggested that if US power is waning, or if the economy starts to decouple a little bit between, you know, the haves and the have-nots, and there's more political instability, then this is an example, as with the tariffs, of the US expressing its power in the best way that it can to try and reorganize things to mitigate some of those losses in power and the like. And this could just be an example of it. But if you think about who governs America, and you think about who governs Russia, whether it's oligarchs, people who benefited very much from the privatization of state assets after the fall of the Soviet Union, or you're talking about a man who's benefited a lot in kind as a result of World Liberty Financial or cryptocurrency holdings or fraud in the case of his father, Fred Trump, then we're talking about people who probably do speak the same language, even if Steve Witkoff or Jared Kushner lack the sort of pedigree of international diplomats previously. They're able to exercise a real power politics of, well, let's make some money.
No, for sure. Well, I think even, like you said, whether it's Russian oligarchs, but then on the flip side, it really is just American oligarchs as well. It really isn't a democracy in the way that people kind of foresee it.
Steve Witkoff's a billionaire.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. And I think, like, it's the bittersweet moment of thinking and seeing for yourself, okay, finally, at least like Ukrainian civilians are going to have some sort of relief, and innocent Ukrainian civilians aren't going to, we hope, die anymore. And obviously the parallels are quite similar to Gaza as well, right? Trump was able to strong arm this deal, but then who's benefiting from it? Like you said before, just follow the money. And I don't know what else to say on that, really.
No, precisely. And speaking of the situation in Gaza, I just wanted to give a few updates for the people at home about Israel's actions and antagonism in the region. So on 18th of November, an Israeli drone strike hit Ain el-Hilwa, a Palestinian refugee camp near Sidon, killing at least 14 people, including 12 children, according to UN human rights officials. Also, there was a ceasefire called between Hezbollah and Lebanon and Israel. But on the 23rd of November, Israel launched an airstrike on the southern suburbs of Beirut, the capital city of Lebanon, killing Hezbollah's acting chief of staff. This is not being documented very widely. And I think if you remember back to the conversation we had around the ceasefire, that there is a lot of weight being put in the same way that Labour has put a lot of weight in. We are recognizing a state of Palestine, even though the substantive elements to their policy towards Palestine didn't change. Similarly, the nominal sort of address of a ceasefire is totally undermined by the substantive behavior of Israel that isn't being treated with the same like sort of reprimandation or discipline that you would associate with a ceasefire. Honestly astonishing, but at the same time not surprising.
No, I wouldn't say it's surprising at all, especially with the Russian government has less kids' gloves on it for obvious reasons. People remember things like Novichok, the Salisbury poisonings, and those have a very real presence in their minds. We're talking about a generation that grew up on James Bond in certain exploits in a Cold War context, so it makes sense. Whereas for the Israeli government, what it's both been able to do through BICOM, through its association with the Labour Friends of Israel, funded trips to go and see what the International Court of Justice has described as an illegal occupation, generally means, or participation in Eurovision or in sport, generally means that the Israeli government's actions are seen, at least in my perspective, in a very different light. I'm somebody, because I'm a radical empath, I think Israelis, Palestinians, all human beings have a right to life, but that life does not necessarily extend to the degree that my life is secure and happy and free for you to sacrifice yours, or for me to step on or step over your body in order to get some sort of freedom or justice. That's not freedom or justice indeed to me. And I think when we're talking about, by some estimates, 500 violations of the ceasefire since the 9th of October this year, then we're talking about a government that is still generally able to, despite any number of UN resolutions or court indictments or arrest warrants from the International Criminal Court, which were also issued for Hamas high-ranking members, most of whom are deceased now, if you like. The Israeli government has received its hostages back as a result of this deal, and yet what's changed? When we think about who benefits, there's contractors like Palantir who've managed to make billions as a result of this. Benjamin Netanyahu is in a stronger position as it applies to his re-election bid coming up. But for Palestinians on the ground, for the Lebanese people who are living there in the south, where Hezbollah originally in the 1980s comes out of an Israeli invasion of Lebanon at the time, is both and I think this is one of the key issues, and it comes back to what is the socialization of people when it comes to these issues. If Russia has always been this big bad as portrayed in movie and television and TV shows, but the Israeli government has come in a different form, or you receive it in a different form, then it's going to be more difficult for you to reckon with a very bloody and violent history, but also to see groups like Hezbollah or Hamas as political actors and not just sort of vague or amorphous murderous thugs, though they've committed acts of violence. It's quite difficult for people to understand that, say, Hezbollah is also a political party.
Literally, people like Hezbollah runs hospitals, Hezbollah runs administrative functions in southern Lebanon, but they're framed in like Western media as being a terrorist group only.
And I think to keep on your theme of radical empathy, because obviously radical empathy actually makes you, it's not just some passive feeling, but action. People at home might be feeling hopeless. I mean, we feel hopeless all the time when we cover this. And I think this is just a good time to remind people that Israel have been on a campaign for 100 plus years, or 100 years or so, to normalize these actions. And that's why they're seen in a different light. And so it's up to us to do whatever we can in our small capacity to make sure that normalization doesn't continue. So whether that's still boycotting, all right, just because it's not in the news or in the headlines, still don't go to, I don't know, your McDonald's or whatever.
And even, it can inspire hope itself.
Yeah.
Like, people at home, you're probably, like, look at the level of fuckery that's getting normalized, and think to yourself, we could flip that coin and actually normalize some level of goodness in the world.
Yeah, for sure.
Can I mention he who should not be named?
Who is that?
David Lammy.
Oh my days. Bro, even Voldemort's better than David Lammy.
Bro, some of the petals on the flower just started to like...
In it, yeah. I feel very cold now.
Yeah, man,
I don't
shivers.
know what's
It's the smell of sulfur.
With David Lammy, I have a very interesting politician.
I was going to say something, but tell us about your relationship with David Lammy.
So it's like this.
Your uncle.
No, in one sense, if you're, say, like from a particular background, there's a natural affinity that you might have, say, with certain figures who reach a certain level and whatnot.
Not me.
Perhaps not for sure. But say you were to look at David Lammy's career in a vacuum. Goes to, I can't remember if it's Yale or Stanford, but goes abroad to the US, has, I think, a Fulbright scholarship.
Harvard, I think.
Harvard.
Yeah.
It was Harvard, indeed. Becomes an MP quite young, has a powerful speech on Windrush, if you like. Those like highlights. And then next to that, you also have a man who has done many interesting things, compromises, to reach a particular level of power. And this person is somebody who spoke in one voice and one language, just like Shabana Mahmood to a degree, just like Keir Starmer, who at one point was saying kick Israel out of FIFA because, 500 checkpoints, 1 million Palestinians detained or arrested since 1967, military courts and military law with 99% conviction rates. Switches from that to also being the same prime minister who presides over the continuation of 16 Elbit sites, which continue to produce the kind of parts that may have killed a British citizen in April of 2024. But I think with looking at these people, it teaches me two things. One, that you can't sort of romanticize individuals or human beings because they're only human beings and they'll let you down. But two, that with Lammy or any of these people, that radical empathy for me extends to you as a human being and separates, if you like, that human being from the action, if you like.
I hear it, yeah.
You know what? In one word, though, for us, David Lammy, just an idiot.
Yeah. You're a better man than me, because me with David Lammy, is deeper, innit?
It's on site.
Yeah, because
also I'm from Enfield, which is next to Tottenham. Bro, let me not even get to how Tottenham residents actually feel about him, but carry on.
You know what it is, with David Lammy and characters like that, it makes me feel even more sour when you see them try and invoke their like ethnicity or cultural heritage to try and buy back some points from us, because it works for a while, but at this point it's like, David Lammy, you're invoking the ideas of Windrush. But let me tell you what he's doing for the man them right now.
Go on then.
Like David Lammy is currently trying to put forward proposals to get rid of trial by a jury of your peers for certain offences. Only the most serious offences such as murder, manslaughter, rape, and a narrow set of others would retain jury trials. Many other offences that currently go to Crown Court with a jury could be heard by a judge sitting alone in a newly created Crown Court bench division. Up to 3/4 of current jury cases could shift to judge-only trials. People at home, just to clarify, when we talk about trial by a jury of your peers, these are stuff you might have seen in TV where like people get called up to be the jury and they're just random members of the public, and they're able to give you more of a, let's say, a holistic judgment relative to what a single judge might give you. And also just on a statistical level, it increases the proportion of like getting towards a median. I just think we spoke a lot on Northstar about the real impacts downstream of public infrastructure being degraded. And there's what we're seeing. Because they will justify this by saying the Crown Court is taking over 78,000 cases and that there's too many delays and this, that, and the third. So the solution is to make further cuts or to reduce the quality of the product we're providing, instead of looking upstream and saying, well, why is it that the Crown Court can't handle the cases that are happening?
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say. Well, actually, I got a lot to say. So you might
fair enough. Yeah, no, I just think basically what you're saying is austerity on justice, right? And I feel like it feels as if like liberal society and what we kind of consider this kind of modern British project is starting to turn inward on itself, and is now riddled with contradictions because our own social fabric is just disintegrating in front of our eyes, right? With the ECHR conversations, people want to take away Human Rights Act and repeal it and reform it, and now even like the kind of basic kind of structures of a social fabric, the right to a jury is going.
Bro, literally, imagine if you got caught one time when you're out there phone snatching. And
oh my day! How is this going to stick? How is this actually going to stick? How is this going to stick?
That's what they told me.
You got two phones.
Yeah, but you look like a phone snatcher, fam, not me. Like.
So my phone is over here actually to keep it safe.
I don't even know my phone is. But how would you feel if you just pulled up here, just one like with the wig on, innit? Bare dandruff all over the gaff, innit? Just telling you, 10 years upon your head.
Bro, like honestly, I mean to be honest though, for phone snatchers, you actually don't deserve a jury. But anyways, carry on.
Yeah, as in like, not even to sidetrack it. But you know what? If I became London Mayor, one of my first policies, if you're a balaclava in public, that is a reason to stop a search.
Isn't that's why?
Oh no, that's fine. I don't think anybody has a problem with that because why you got the shy like?
Yeah, any of that sort of stuff here, it's just like allow it.
Yeah.
No. So for me, it depends. Because say you're talking about protest. One of the changes to the crime and policing bill with Labour is that they want to say create a situation where if you have a mask, you could be fined or this or that or whatever if you have that approach in a protest. But obviously, a certain protest, even if it's a farmer's protest, you might not want your employer, old farmer Ted, back on the farm to see where you are or what you're doing, etc. But coming back to trial by jury.
That's why you get paid the big bucks.
Trial by jury. Again, what we have is a weird situation where this is a right enshrined from the Magna Carta 1215 to now.
That's what I mean. It's part of like our
it's part
history.
of the fabric. It's literally quintessential, at least in my view, to democracy because it is trial by your peers. The idea that no person, for me at least, should rise above the condition of their people, and that's why if you commit, say, crimes or do things that harm people in your community, then at some level you should be judged by them. Already you have an issue with whether or not juries are representative, and yet we know that they're more representative than the judiciary. You have a situation where I think the ethnic population from the 2021 census is about 19%, but if you compare that to the number of judges who are from, and of course my sister, for example, hates the term BAME, but if we're talking about being black and ethnic minorities, then you're talking about 12%, I think, of judges who fit into that particular. And we're talking about black judges, you're talking about just 1%. And already we know that there are several structural elements in the police, in the court system that might mean that people from working class backgrounds, people who are Gypsy, Roma, traveller, people who are, black and brown might find themselves in front of a judge more often. They might get a longer custodial sentence for the same crime. They're more likely, according to inquest, to die in police custody. These are the factors surrounding the system in which we're feeding people through. So if we're sending people in front of a judge and there's not that the averaging effect that happens when you get other people with very different life experiences.
Ability to relate.
Of course.
Like a single judge might not be able to relate to you bumping train here this morning.
Well, I didn't bump train. I just got to make that clear.
Look at his Daily Mail headlines in the middle right here.
Who do you work for? And what we have is a situation where if in that situation, one, they won't be able to relate, but two, it's a sort of an assumption. Why is a judge necessarily going to be better at doing a fact-finding mission than you or I? A judge might be good at analytics, a judge might be good at the legal or the rhetorical flourish, but whether or not anyone is better than somebody else, or at least 10, 12 other people at coming to what the facts are, is not necessarily the case.
I hear it. I'm still going to stick with my London Mayor principle of balaclavas, you can get searched.
Don't even ask me to comment that because I think Sharia law should be in London, but carry on.
But you know my other policies though? I got policies. One day we'll have a Northstar, I'll talk about my policies because two headline ones, you know those tuk-tuks that are in central London?
Yeah.
With like the pink fur and stuff. They gotta go.
That's culture. That's culture.
That's not character. That's not my culture.
That's character.
That's not culture.
That's character.
The other one.
So when you come Ghana, you're going to take away...
That's your culture. That's your culture. But
that's British culture.
Second one, embassies are going to be where the people are. The Bengali embassy, the Bangladesh embassy doesn't need to be in Mayfair. It needs to be on Whitechapel Road. The Portuguese embassy needs to be in Stockwell.
I'm not going to lie, the Bengali embassy literally is on Whitechapel Road.
We need to imagine that though. Like the Ghanaian embassy in Tottenham. The Jamaican embassy in Brixton.
I'm not hearing it.
That's cold.
Embassies are aspirational.
Turkish embassy, Haringey Green Lanes.
Listen, we don't need any more, bro.
Pakistani embassy in Newham. This is cold.
Sovereign territories as well.
Sovereign, you know what I mean? It's cold.
No, because then it feeds into the argument of those people who already believe that we're living in like these.
Oh yeah,
that's what I'm saying. You have to kind of like
I'm
get
fully
out
on that
of your
glorious
community.
multiculturalism.
You know what?
Can I ask you something?
Go for it.
As like you said you don't like the term BAME, but you said to take you out
only because statistically
you love David Lammy.
I don't love David Lammy.
Did you see?
I love him as a human being.
Okay. In the same
I
way
love
we
you
love
as a human
yeah,
being.
there we go. But you love me more than David Lammy.
Yeah, but that doesn't apply to everyone though, surely. Because you don't love Netanyahu as a human being.
I love people's humanity. I think that's what makes radical empathy.
You love Netanyahu.
No, you won't get that out of me, brother.
Yeah.
You can
Yisrael loves Netanyahu.
So what we're gonna say here?
But some humans don't have humanity.
No. Right? It's not that. For radical empathy, what you're trying to say is your ceiling might be here, your floor might be here, but your rubric is not mine. So that no matter how far you sink or how bad you do, I have to still see you as human. Because if I see you as any less, then before long I can catch myself doing the same things that you're doing. Because after all, we have people here in the West talking about human rights, talking about justice, talking about freedom and all these things, and yet they want to take away the right to trial enshrined in the Magna Carta for over 800 years. And who's that going to affect? It's going to affect those poor and huddled masses. And if you have a situation where we're talking about freedom, justice, human rights, but you're also, allowing the export of weapons to a government accused of genocide that is run by Netanyahu, then, we have a problem. Again, it's that difference between rhetoric and reality.
I agree, and I think
but I still love you.
No, I agree totally. I mean, we're a little bit in jest, but I often think of like the phrase, they ate Nat Turner. Nat Turner, who led the slave rebellion. White people around the US ate his skin and bones. Had it boiled down into pills.
Jerky.
Exactly. Had it boiled down into pills for white housewives to take to increase their strength. And I think that's always an important reminder that the people that did that were just as human as you and I.
Exactly.
We mentioned a lot of times the banality of evil, but a big point to remember is that all of us are capable of that within our biology.
Absolutely.
It's only our ideological principles that can help guide us away from that. It's ideological principles that push people towards that, and it's ideological principles that can push people away from that.
Reflecting on, I think in, might have been year 8, year 9, we did the trip to Auschwitz, of course. And I remember just I don't know if it was spiritual or what it was, but the pressure of seeing the little shoes arranged and whatnot, and of knowing that people have been gassed with Zyklon B and other things in these 4 walls, and the people who did it were just as human. I think one of the greatest mistakes ever is when people describe the Holocaust as a unique evil. It's unique in one sense, in that it was a horrible and industrialized scale of killing that had not been seen before, but unique from the standpoint of humans. The same humans that did what they did in the in the Congo state from the Belgians, the same humans who helped transport what's happening in Sudan right now, what happened in Yemen. The idea that it reminds me of when the Ukraine war started out and people were talking about how it was odd for Europeans. It's a sort of received hierarchy of humanity that is very difficult to deal with if we actually want to get to grips with the problems.
And something that we're going to probably bring up a bit later in the episode as well is that it's so important to remind our own communities who are on this kind of journey towards justice and pro-human rights, etc., that even in like some of the most, I guess, heart-wrenching kind of political happenings in the world, whether it's Gaza, etc., we need to actually still remember that we need to commit to our own principles and not fall into the same traps that the other are doing by that dehumanization.
Because one of the saddest things that you see in some of the modern political movements, and of course social media makes it easy, of course some of it is bots and whatnot, and is a big issue that I have personally, is people's tendency to dehumanize, or how easy it can be for people to dehumanize others, and then they end up not sounding all that different to other people.
It's a modern tribalism.
Yeah, and it's like, we look at people like, let's say, the veil's been pulled back for a lot of people from the Israel-Gaza stuff, where someone you might have thought for 20 years was like a decent, credible member of the political sphere, you now realize, oh, you're a monster. And your opinion was right relatively. But the same holds for a lot of people that would consider themselves maybe left-wing or on the right side of history.
Absolutely.
That maybe they are supporting pro-Palestine issues at this point, but then when you see the vernacular or the language they use around their hate for Israel, you realize, oh, there's actually something deeper underlying. Or even if you see their response to other very similar issues, we, in private, and we want to talk about this on the show a lot more, is the hierarchy of support for different issues, whether it be Palestine, Sudan, Congo, in that order, and what betrays that, what underlies that. And I think that radical empathy that you speak of is incredibly important for people to reflect on what really is motivating their political decisions or the things they support.
No, absolutely. I think myself and Sean have talked about it, how you've had some of the most amazing and wonderful people, in one sense, in their application of their support, their protests or whatnot for Palestinian human rights to prevent genocide, to prevent settler colonialism, etc., etc. But then as soon as the lens switches to Sudan or to child poverty, 44%, for example, in Manchester, or any number of issues, perhaps the light dims a bit, and some of that is natural. But if it goes from that to, say, some of what I've heard, people villainizing Jewish people,
a blackout of lights,
bringing back, elders of the Protocol of Zion, or, somebody's making a video about who owns the trains, and then all of a sudden I'm getting an answer of a government thousands of miles away, and it makes you wonder to what degree is this actually based on your empathy for Palestinians or your fight for human rights, and to what degree is it based off what those who are critics of that movement would say about us. And I think it's important for us not necessarily to live by the metric imposed by a critic, but to understand in whatever it is that we're doing that we should hold that empathy and make sure that nobody is being dehumanized because of how strongly you feel.
Yisrael, you might have to come back every week. That was an absolutely jam-packed state of play. We knew it would be. A lot of stuff going on today. Budget, Ukraine, Israeli behaviors and the like. Yisrael, we appreciate those words of wisdom and we want to hear some more in your Let Me Land. Should we get into it?
Sure. Some people don't care whether or not children go to bed hungry at night. Some people don't care whether some children are bombed if it means others aren't. Some people don't care who is the person making the decisions as long as they're like them or think like them. In other words, what I'm trying to say is that for a lot of people in progressive spaces, they don't actually care about the people that we care about or that I care about. They just care about being right, feeling like they've done something or they are something, as opposed to the real practical implications of whatever it is that they believe.
That's real.
Fairs, he's taking it there, man.
might have been the first one we seen landed immediately.
Yeah, I know.
But Yisrael, unpack that for us.
So in one sense, it's like, I remember, for example, speaking with certain people who, it could be something easy. So they think that if capitalism disappeared overnight, all of a sudden racism would be dead. But the people who often say that to me are people who either have a certain conception of what race is or what racism is that ignores, if you like, anything before sort of what people often describe as proto-capitalism, the transatlantic slave trade, the Congo Free State, etc., and ignores centuries of a scramble of Africa or any number of historical examples prior to that, or of any contact between peoples across continents. Another example could be people who, for example, want Labour to win so much that if it means that, say, the two-child benefit cap is still in place or that arms sales are still being sold, not just to the Israeli government, we've talked about the Israeli government, but I could be talking about Saudi Arabia. I saw somebody describe Mohammed bin Salman as the bone saw, a man who's cracked down on journalists where civil liberties for women have been, restricted. That wouldn't matter to them. Or people who, for example, will on one hand praise the resistance to the Israeli government's assault from, for example, Iran or the Houthis, but at the same time fail to recognize that the Houthis have crucified people if they're homosexual. So what I'm saying is that people are not necessarily consistent, and not necessarily because they can't or don't have access to that information, but sometimes that they choose not to. They have that intellectual stopgap. They might be great here on poverty. They might be great here on reducing global poverty. They might be great here on violence against women and girls. But as soon as it comes to, for example, Brianna J, a trans child who's killed, basically, or it comes to black women dying on the operating table because their mortality rate is so much higher when giving birth, then all of a sudden there's radio silence.
We kind of spoke about this a little bit in State of Play, where it's like, you happen to be on the right side of history for this issue, but in fact your guiding principles are something slightly different. And I guess all three of us are, minority ethnics within the left wing space in politics in the UK. What's been you guys' experiences of that?
Well, I think it's quite interesting you bring up that kind of weirdness, because I feel like in particular, in practice, you only really experience this when you're actually doing the kind of active campaigning or you're behind the scenes. And to kind of even just colour in like some of these experiences, I wanted to kind of bring up a story around how we met at a Palestine march. So forgive me if you don't want me to talk about this or anything. But so look, Yisrael has been doing his thing for a long time, probably one of the biggest platforms for left-wing short-form content in the country. And obviously at the Palestine march, you kind of want to get your message out. You want to be able to kind of get these kind of young influencers who understand social media to help you put your message out. And I found it really strange when I got there, because Northstar politics, bit of nobodies in the grand scheme of things. Back then. Now we're big names.
Big name. Big stage.
They kind of like, you were there trying to get like your Vox Pops or whatever, but then they didn't let you behind the scenes.
Who's they?
They being like, I don't know, the Palestine the organisers for the march.
Don't be saying Palestine Action.
No, I can't be saying Palestine Action.
We're going to get raided.
Yeah. But I found it really strange, because if you are committed to those principles, you obviously want to use the mediums and use the strategies to get your message out in the most effective way. And here you are trying to literally do that alongside them, and they're literally treating you as if we know him and we know what he does, but we don't want him anywhere near this. And I found that so weird, because we've got behind there before.
But it's also, on our end though, it's like we've had so many experiences that obviously people might not know, but before Northstar Politics was Northstar Politics Media, we were just literally working as campaigners and consultants in the political space. And so many times you would...
For free?
Literally for free. And so many times you would come across instances where we're literally two young ideological guys who want to do the best work we can, but we're being obstructed from literally doing free work to help people by like sort of these posses around certain political factions or politicians who are just really bought into this clout politics and maintaining the access they have to these characters rather than actually caring about whatever goal they claim to espouse.
And it's a commitment to identity and that kind of clout, like you say, over the actual principles.
Yeah, honestly, like one day maybe we'll drop the Northstar politics tier list. Where we've got a tier list of everyone we've interacted with in politics. Yeah, and it's been so many characters. Where it's like, what is going on here?
As in, like, it's as if you want to kind of shake them. Be like, do you care about this issue? Because we can actually help you get to where you need to get. Strange.
No, it's that thing of cliques, I guess, form naturally at some level. But I think it's weird if your politics is about, moving people forward, pushing the envelope, bringing people with you and together, and rising tide lifts all boats, and whichever and every other thing I could say about that issue, then it's odd for people to sometimes gatekeep both individuals, access, and all this kind of stuff in a way that sort of represents a sort of like a sort of social currency, But that doesn't pay anybody's bills at the end of the day. It doesn't pay for anybody to get on cheaper transport. It doesn't change the state of play, and it can be frustrating because I can see not even people like myself, but other young people I've seen, aspiring journalists and whatnot, trying to get access to this person or that person and being told, no, you can't get in here. It's feeling like, the start of Look at Me Now by Chris Brown with Lil Wayne on there. You even hate him from outside of the club. That makes sense. This was a different time. This was a different time. This was the early 2010s.
When he was all right to listen to.
Lil Wayne, Busta Rhymes. Enough said.
I think he's cancelled as well. To be fair. But yeah, carry on, sorry.
Oh no. So what I was going to say is, it's a sad state of affairs where people like yourselves might have talent. You might have. You might have intellect. You might have any number of these skills, any of these skills or talents, but you feel like you can't use them or deploy them as easily as you can. And so what we've even seen is some people go down a very different route entirely because perhaps it pays the bills or it gives them the access that they were craving or the validation that they wanted or that they could have in a movement and they could make a difference only because somebody, left the door open for them. What I often hear from people who say are part of different political movements, say the movements of a Tommy Robinson or a Nigel Farage or even people further afield, is how easy it is to be part of it, how easy it is to take part. And I think it's perhaps also the limits of identity politics, where it is, if you're going to say, oh, you can only come with me if you think this way or feel this way, then automatically excluding a great group of people. And it's not a very human way to do politics. It's politics by spreadsheet.
I can't even tell you how hard it was for me and Sean to get involved in certain things.
As in, Northstar has been around for 2 years now. It's only become something because we've decided to come out into the public sphere with ourselves, invest in ourselves, and actually put something out there. It's such a self-defeating short-sightedness as well that people on the left have. Because like you said, it's very easy to get involved with the right. It's very easy to get involved with the Conservatives or whoever it may be. Come to Labour. Okay, if you care about the Labour Party, well, it just depends on who you know. You've got to network your way up. Come to any other sort of like progressive way. The pathways don't even exist. They don't even invest or have some sort of long-sightedness to look forward to the future.
And it's worth reminding people that say you're on within the capitalist realm, then your currency is finance. But if you're within a socialist realm or a left-wing realm, then your currency isn't finance. Your currency is people. You're over communitarian politic. Therefore, you need to be able to garner the support and the sort of organization of people. With that being said, our critiques we offered, I'm assuming none of you boys are going to the Your Party conference this weekend.
If I could, maybe I would. But in terms of that project, I think British politics needs more variety. It needs more people involved, more people engaged. So I wish every success to your party, as I do to a great deal of political parties. I have no political affiliation, of course, until otherwise disclosed. But that means that people have to get their act together. That means that they have to work together. They have to push personal differences, agendas, and egos aside. We have to stop worshipping human beings because they have MP in their name or because they have a particular credential or pedigree. We're all human beings at the end of the day. If somebody cuts my hand, it bleeds blood. If I go to sleep at night, I might have dreams. I wake up, I might have hopes. And because of that, and nothing being so different between people under the sun, it's very important that we put these things to the side, because at the end of the day, this is people's lives we're talking about. And as I said before, it's, do you want to be right or do you want to win?
I mean, shout out to you. I'm calling up Amex to get my £5 back because like it's
Amex, you got it like that.
Come on now,
It's light.
something like
Black card, express.
Do you ever think that maybe the reason they don't let you like behind the scenes at some of these marches is because you look, sound, walk, and talk like a CIA agent?
I don't think I have that.
Nah, I
sort
prefer
of,
Malcolm X, man. Don't do my boy like that.
No, I
Come
don't
on
think
now.
I have that
Bro,
kind of
do
CIA
you want
energy.
me to go down the wormhole on that one?
No, I don't think I have the CIA energy for that. You know, I'll tell you why. Yeah, I can't color inside the lines. Yeah, I taught myself how to tie my own shoelaces. Yeah, for me, a CIA agent is like put together.
But what does that mean? Like, is that what does that metaphor mean?
Now let him be esoteric if he wants to, man.
Metaphor, bro. What I'm trying to say,
literally taught
what I'm trying to say is that the CIA man comes cookie cutter. It's people who maybe steal phones or have like an entire intro based on a place where they're from.
Okay, that's what a
You know,
CIA
they-
agent would say. We got him. I can't lie.
People that
One
got
sec.
backstory.
All right, boys, come in now. He's here.
But one thing is, right, when you actually do kind of finally make it into the clique here, look, the left obviously like principle themselves on identity politics, descriptive representation, all these sorts of things, yeah. Listen, what I'm saying, yeah, in my experience, not that I even like care that much, just white English.
As in, I know you maybe don't want to say this here because Novo is a bit too neutral, but literally, like the left will love to talk about how in all of the public institutions we have, the further you go up, the whiter it is. The same thing's true of the left.
Bro, Conservative Party is more woke than some of these like progressive
Yeah,
left
like
people.
visually in a lot of ways, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, and it's also just it all seems to be like a weird like same generation of students who were just like
Who
friends
came
in
up
the
in a certain
2010s.
who came up in a certain generation, had particular views about international politics.
But also it's like we have talent, yeah. All right, nice, good one. I like that one. But we have talent, yeah, and like we just want to use that to further these movements. So why is it the case we're coming to these people and it feels like we're literally begging
Well, it's because
to
it's-
help,
it's-
begging?
It's not a meritocracy, I think, and I think that's the key
Yeah.
thing.
Always, it doesn't reward competence.
If all of these movements are reflective of like the society that we live in, then if you have a situation where somebody 20, 30 years ago started a thing, now he's on she's on a six-figure salary, the incentive to allow new ideas, fresh energy in, things that threaten sponsors or do any of these things is different. Whereas now you have these new models. If you have Patreon or this or that, it's far easier for you to, build and engage in networks and with people who are not necessarily in the same bracket or spaces or who are not necessarily going to be accepted in the same way.
And even
shape,
that's
or
why
form as
with
others.
Northstar, we talk about our like manifesto and the way we want to do politics. From the start, we wanted to collaborate with people early on. Not necessarily. Obviously, it's great for us to collaborate with you, brilliant co-host. But just because we think that's important to reinforce that within left-wing politics in the UK, because it is so exclusionary, it is so cliquey. When in fact, it needs to be really inclusive and communitarian.
And I would say to that with the white thing as well, I don't think it's just white people, of course. It's actually working class people. There's people in these movements who did the whole private school gauntlet, were taught how to hold the right knife and fork, etc., etc. Had the silver spoon from day
We were
one.
taught you need to be.
I
We were taught
was
you.
taught that. Shout out my mum, innit?
In the Caribbean, people actually they pride themselves on that.
But that's the thing. That's different. That's in your house. That was at the kitchen table. That was disciplinary action from your mother, father, auntie, uncle, grandparent, or
Not
whatnot.
father, but Karen.
Everybody's got a
For both
story.
of us, for both of us, not father.
Everybody's got a story, man. And in that sort of world, it's very different for those people to allow, say, like, how many times have you seen a gypsy Roma traveler person at the top level of politics? How many times have you seen a Jewish
Can I say
man
something as well, yeah?
or woman from a working class background to the top
People
side of
at home
politics?
do your research, but I would say after women, Romani gypsies are the most persecuted people in European history.
Yeah,
I'll put that out there.
fair enough.
Real talk, real pogroms, constant abuse. I could be on a
They were
train.
held in chattel slavery in Transylvania.
People talking literally in the UK about gypsy Roma traveller people as if we're talking about black people in the 60s, 50s and so on and so forth. They're all thieves, they're all this, they're all that. That's a whole other issue that we really need to deal with. We also really need to deal with the fact that disability discrimination is often at the very bottom of the agenda. But there are literally millions of disabled people in the UK. But back to the main point, it was that you don't even see many white working class people at the top of these
No,
movements,
it's true.
which is why
That's true.
voices like Mick Lynch were such a breath of fresh air for so many people,
Legend.
because they saw somebody speaking the same kind of
actual
language,
legend.
Eddie Dempsey,
speaking
rating
truth
Eddie
to
Dempsey,
power,
rating him as well.
and yet coming from places that they're from. How many people can relate to somebody who maybe is in a progressive space but looks, sounds, talks, and has a trust fund just like David Cameron?
But to be fair, Keir Starmer's dad was a tool maker, and what a tool he made.
That was good.
But-
You've been cooking that one.
When's your set started?
Not new to this, we're true to this. But listen,
The
honestly,
Netflix deal is incoming.
we've got a lot off our chest there, and obviously you landed that. as far as we're concerned, you landed that. But we want to hear from people at home. Get in the comments. Talk about your experience of trying to get involved in left-wing politics in the
Please
UK.
do.
And even just talk about how it seems maybe from the outside, if you're not someone who's actively involved, but we want Northstar to be a locus, a hub where people can get involved. We see people commenting all the time. It's been brilliant.
Yeah, and also give us some ideas for how we can take this from online into the real world. Take it offline. Because
we need audience. Bring people through.
What? A Northstar X Novo first event? You want to do that?
Oh, well, let's keep this behind the scenes. Behind the scenes. But listen, we think you landed there. I think you're the first person to come in and land the plane from start to finish. Just kept it on the runway the whole time.
It's been shaky.
Yeah.
I promise you it's been shaky.
Some people, some of the planes we've seen flying around here, yeah. Malaysia Airlines.
Episode 8, how was that, Noah?
What an episode. Yisrael, we need you here every week.
Innit? Definitely the most poetic episode we've had, that's for sure.
We literally had a rapper on last week.
I'll take it. I was asked off camera to say, wrap up, to bring it to a close. So just to say, we're living in dangerous times. We've got climate change. Nature communications suggest that by the year 2100, if we hit that 4 degrees mark, you might see excess deaths over 83 million people. We're talking in 2024, 200 billion pounds of damage. We're talking about Black River in Jamaica, a place where entire homes were washed away and where the government, the UK government, the same government that once had, if you like, the Queen go and visit Jamaica as a colony, only pledged so much money, despite what we take from Jamaica in our music, in our food, in the patty down the road, in rice and peas, as many of us have enjoyed over the years. And we're also dealing with rising levels of dehumanization, whether it's the kind that you see on social media where people are telling people that they're less than human, whether it's the dehumanization of Palestinians, Yemenis, whether it's the dehumanization of Jews in Manchester, as we saw just a couple of weeks ago. We're seeing rising levels of dehumanization, global conflict and problem, more nuclear weapons than we've had in many a year, and a renewed effort to get nuclear weapons, and violence against women and girls on the streets. I could go on and on, but the difference is, because of things like Northstar, we are creating the spaces bit by bit, where people are having a little bit of hope. They're having a bit more pep in their step. Maybe they do have a little bit too much dip on their chip, but they're able to handle it in a way that perhaps they couldn't. We're seeing the resurgence of these third spaces and communities because people know that you can't take it lying down. I don't plan to. I know many of my friends and family don't plan to either. And in order to fight back against that tide of dehumanization, that tide of somehow lower wages but higher stock market valuations of billionaires able to spend millions on weddings, whereas some of us might get married with the civil registry and 3 guests and then head over to TGI Friday. This is the circumstance that we're dealing with. And in order to reverse that tide, we need to be able to bring people together. We need to be able to have these conversations. We need to be able to push the envelope forward. And if you like, that's what having a North Star is all about. Having a guiding light, whether it's, the number of private school educated people in the BBC, or it's the gatekeeping that happens in some of these political spaces. All of this serves to try and diminish the light of often ordinary people who work with their hands, people who've served this country for years in ways that are not necessarily celebrated on the news or on the media, which is why these spaces are so essential. It gives a voice, not to the voiceless, but to people who perhaps have been deliberately ignored. Windrush, the radioactive chapati scandal, any number of issues that you're talking about where people are not able to bring those issues to the front, but we can change that. And this is part of it. This is just the beginning.
Bow, bow, bow.
Fez.
Oh, that was so good, fam.
You know what? That's why he's the GOAT. Do you understand?
We'll leave it there. Like, share, subscribe, and we'll see you next week. Oh, that was so good, bro.